I saw you on, I think it was MSN. No, it wasn't you, but a reporter was on MSNBC describing to one of the anchors that this supervisor of elections, everything she's done, destroying ballots, and it was almost like the anchor on MSNBC. It's like,
Her
wait,
jaw dropped. Her
right.
jaw dropped.
Wait,
It
you're
was
telling me that
MSNBC.
politicians are corrupt in America? You don't
Yeah.
say. It seems like everything you've been saying for the last 2 years about this one official, but overall, I mean, that it was a rigged election in South Florida, basically to re-elect Debbie Wasserman Schultz, that all of a sudden now people are starting to take notice. Some are calling you a conspiracy theorist because they don't want, any questioning going on there.
Right.
But
Right.
what are your thoughts on that journalist response and the overall response to this?
Well, first I'll say there's a great definition of a conspiracy theorist. It's somebody who asks questions to known liars. Secondly, I'll say that there was an actual conspiracy that occurred here in regards to my 2016 ballots, a criminal conspiracy that we proved in court, that Brenda Snipes conspired with her director, Dozell Spencer, to destroy the ballots. And both of their names were on the destruction order. And then finally, that MSNBC interview was Mark Caputo, a very good reporter with Politico, who was being interviewed. And Caputo was the reporter at Politico who broke the story on the ballot destruction in the first place. And I think he came out with that story before we even had Brenda Snipes admitting to it on videotaped deposition, sworn depositions. So, people can throw whatever kinds of names they want to at me, and it's name calling. It's ad hominem argument instead of talking about the facts. And we established an awful lot of facts in the ballot destruction case. That Snipes destroyed these ballots while the lawsuit was pending. She concealed the destruction from the court, and the judge on the Florida Circuit Court agreed with us and granted a summary judgment. And in a 10-page order, he found that Snipes had committed all of these violations of federal and state criminal statutes. Mm-hmm. So when Mark Caputo talked about this on MSNBC recently, I did see a tape of it. Somebody had sent it to me. And you're right, the anchor, her jaw dropped. And, I can imagine it was genuinely kind of an epiphany for her that an elections official, a supervisor of elections, could not just destroy all of the ballots in this rather high-profile congressional race. I mean, this was not some minor race. This was perhaps the most hotly contested primary in the Democratic Party in 2016 for a congressional seat. So it's a little jaw-dropping that the supervisor destroyed the ballots. What kind of supervisor does that? And then that she got away with it, that there were no repercussions, and lo and behold, it's the same supervisor at the center of what seems to be close to deadlocked election for governor and senator in Florida.
And when you look at it through your canvassing, obviously in that district, it's generally, she's been a congressman there for, I think, over a decade. But did you see in your canvassing, more people coming over to you among African Americans, Latinos, young people? What were your expectations and what you guys were seeing as far as voter enthusiasm before that don't match the less than 5% on paper you got?
The groups that we were targeting included African Americans, Hispanics, independents, seniors. I'm trying to remember. There was another group that we were targeting. Young voters. We saw a big turnout in young voters. The numbers show a high turnout of those that were under 40, I believe, which should have been with us. I was told there was a Democratic poll that was out there, which I haven't seen. It was told to me by another candidate that had Wasserman Schultz's disapproval rating in the district at 57%. And it is somewhat telling, I think, that Wasserman Schultz, for all the money she had, and she raised millions of dollars, they didn't publish a single poll. If all the news was so good for Wasserman Schultz, you would have thought she would have just published a good poll, and they didn't do a single one of them. Now, my campaign didn't have much money, so we weren't polling. We saw a lot of enthusiasm on the ground, and it wasn't just those demographics that we were talking about, which you could say are maybe some of the progressive demographics, like young people and Hispanics, Democratic Party Hispanics in particular. But we also got a lot of Republican support, a tremendous amount. I got endorsements. I got folks coming out of the woodwork saying they were voting for us. It just defies imagination that I went from 25,000 votes in a primary 2 years ago to this year, half that.
Right.
Either way, whatever the reality is, I don't know if we'll ever know it for either of these past two elections. I think that in itself is a bit of a statement, how difficult it is to verify a vote. I tried to verify the vote from 2016. That's why I put in the public records request to inspect the paper ballots. We were going to start in about a dozen precincts, and if they matched up, I'd say it was verified. If they didn't, we would try to inspect more precincts.
Right.
Well, they didn't even let us do that.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't have to be so difficult in this country to have a transparent election and to verify the vote. And, between 2016 and this one, and not just my races, I mean, all those Bernie Sanders races where a dozen times the exit poll showed him winning and he ends up losing the race. And everyone's got stories to tell that just seems, well, it can be explained if you trust the system. Okay? Just trust the system and it all makes sense. After all, my poll result, my election results were published in the Sun Sentinel. It must be true. It was published in the Sun Sentinel. And if that's your mindset, that you're going to just trust authority, and authority in this case is Brenda Snipes. I mean, really, you're going to trust somebody who destroys ballots and then campaigns openly with Wasserman Schultz? I'm sorry. I don't want to trust the untrustworthy. And I don't think that's a way to run a democracy.
Well, it also...
faith that Santa Claus exists. We'll have faith that we have fair elections.
Well, it also seems like the Sun Sentinel down there, you know more than I, but it seems like they have pretty strong financial interests in Debbie Wasserman Schultz staying in office, and establishment Democrats. I mean, they might have not rigged the box down there, but it does seem like the media down there, more, even in some cases worse than what Bernie dealt with. Seems like the Sun Sentinel down there props up this election fraud and doesn't even acknowledge it.
Well, I tend to agree with you. Their coverage of the ballot destruction case was terrible. The Miami Herald was terrible. And these are not just local papers. The Sun Sentinel is owned by Conch Corporation, based in Sacramento, the third largest newspaper chain in the country. And the Miami Herald is owned by McClatchy, the second largest newspaper chain in the country. So how much autonomy the local news desks have and the local editorial boards, I don't know. There's surveys for years that have been showing that editors and journalists around the country express that they have less and less journalistic and editorial autonomy, that these media corporations are more run as corporations, and the journalistic ethics really come in last, or they're dropped completely. And we've seen a real suffering of journalistic ethics with the Sun Sentinel, where they'll write a report without even calling me for comment. So it's a one-sided presentation of the facts, and they're usually wrong with the facts, quite frankly, on the ballot destruction case and on others. Mm-hmm. And but their presentation of the facts does mimic the press releases of Wasserman Schultz.
Right. And let me ask you, you have written an open letter to Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, basically asking for a special election for all these races that have been contested, and there's got, issues of where are the provisional ballots, where are the absentee ballots. Are you talking about Gillum versus DeSantis, Nelson versus Scott, as well as you versus Debbie Wasserman Schultz, that you'd like a new special election?
Well, what's sad is that when you express criticism now of Brenda Snipes, when I do, you get a lot of Gillum and Nelson supporters who act as if that means I must be MAGA, Make America Great, and, for Rick Scott and, DeSantis. This is not a partisan issue when you're talking about election integrity. And can you imagine what's going to happen after $100 million is paid in legal fees, and whoever wins these recounts, in the governor's race and the Senate race is going to have a tough time, because half the population is going to think they won it on a stolen election. Mm-hmm. So, I don't think it necessarily serves the interests of Andrew Gillum and, Bill Nelson to stay wedded to a recount rather than a revote. And the reason I bring up a revote is I really have no confidence whatsoever in Brenda Snipes. I look at Brenda Snipes as a criminal because she threw out my ballots, and she did it intentionally and willfully. And I wonder what else is she capable of, and I don't know. But you take a look at these irregularities in this past election, where there's reports of that show a breakdown in the chain of custody just in the paper ballots. And, I must say, Broward County, not just this election after election under Brenda Snipes, is a shit show. The primary that we just had, they found 5,000 ballots the next day, and then I think another 5,000, and it ended up overturning a judicial election. There's a reason that there's a whistleblower investigation going on against Snipes, because this never ends under her. So the public, I think, has lost a lot of faith and confidence in these elections, even if the corporate media has not. Mm-hmm. And, I think there are an awful lot of candidates who would support invalidating the recent election. Let's see if a court will. So I'm talking to folks about it. I'd like to see Pam Bondi take the lead on it. Mm-hmm. Pam Bondi, she grandstanded. Maybe I shouldn't be so harsh and call it grandstanding. I don't know her personally, but she made a statement a day ago, I think, calling for the Department of Law Enforcement. And I think not just a statement, I think she directed them to intensify their investigation of Snipes. And my open letter was, I applaud you for investigating. There should be investigations. But there already was one. I conducted an investigation through civil litigation and the discovery process, and our investigation uncovered criminal wrongdoing that was established in both a videotape deposition and by a court granting summary judgment. The evidence is there, Ms. Bondi. You don't have to wait. You can charge Brenda Snipes with crimes today. And that would be the first step towards moving towards invalidating these elections and trying to hold them transparently. Right. I would love to see a court listen to testimony about people's concerns with the electronic voting machines. And, people can't have it both ways. They can't say that they're afraid that Russia will hack the elections, but then when their candidates win, there's no problem with electronic voting machines. So, I'd like to see a judge invalidate the elections and say, okay, it's time for new elections, and let's do it with paper ballots that are counted by hand in public.